My family abandoned me in order to have a wedding in Hawaii, and then lied and said I was sick, so I exposed their neglect online. I was 17 years old when I was forgotten on the day my parents got married. My parents had been together for 25 years, but they had never actually gotten married. That's why when my father proposed to my mother 49F50M on their anniversary, my mother found herself pregnant with my oldest sister. Everyone, including me, was very happy and celebrated the occasion with great joy, even though they had been together before. It all happened in February, and they immediately started planning the wedding and decided to have a small event in Hawaii with only the closest family and friends for an intimate ceremony. Almost immediately, my mother's younger sister 25F was chosen as the maid of honor, and my father's younger brother 22M was asked to be the best man. I wasn't surprised or offended by this, because my sister had always been a mama's boy, and they both loved spending time together shopping and socializing, so they had a very close bond. The same was true of my father and brother, who always played soccer together and tinkered with cars. My father even coached my brother's team for a while, which made me feel out of place. I tried to fit in with my family's hobbies and groups, but was always rejected, even though I was only home for an hour. Maybe they could sense that I wasn't being sincere about their activities, or maybe they just didn't care. I got used to being the most neglected member of the family. Mom was autistic, Dad had a brother, and Mom and Dad loved each other, while my two siblings had a closer relationship than they did with me. During the preparations for the wedding, I was left alone at home, very lonely and isolated. At first, I was offered the role of flower girl, but this was quickly dropped when my sister decided that role was more suitable for her daughter 3F. Later, my maternal grandmother suggested that I recite a poem or give a short speech at the wedding, but both my parents refused, as they wanted a low-key wedding and didn't feel that a cheesy speech was in line with their vision. Literal meaning, I could still accept all of this, even though I knew that I was the only one in my family who wasn't really participating in the wedding and didn't have any role on the wedding day, and it made me sad. As the wedding approached, my parents and siblings became increasingly busy with the preparations. I noticed that my mother had not invited me to go clothes shopping, and I was excluded when they discussed venues or activities, so I decided to see if they would realize that I was not involved at all and remained silent, waiting for them to ask me anything about the wedding, but this never happened. The wedding was scheduled 3 weeks earlier, at the end of August. The day before we were due to leave, my mother casually asked if I had packed my bags, because we could not be late. I told her bluntly that I had not packed anything. She looked puzzled for a moment, then she got angry with me and said I wasn't prepared. I asked her again if I had the plane ticket or not. Her face turned pale. Yes, they hadn't even bought me a plane ticket. I wasn't even sure if I had a room or any accommodation, even though I was the only one in the family without a steady income, working part-time as a nanny. And my parents had bought first-class tickets for my siblings and a few other friends attending the wedding, but forgot about me. My mother told me not to make a big deal about it, that they could get me a cheap ticket from a budget airline at the last minute, but I just asked her what was the point of me buying a dress then? She and her sister had gone dress shopping together months ago, and all the other female guests had bought theirs too, but not me. That's when my father came in and told me to stop complaining. I've never been a girl who cares about dressing up, so I can wear whatever. I was angry about this, because although I was not the most feminine girl on the planet, I had hoped to be included in such an important part of my parents' wedding. And the fact that I had been excluded made me feel frustrated about everything that had happened over the past few months. We had a fight with them, saying that I was conceited and deliberately belittling myself to make them forget about me. This is indeed a valid excuse for neglecting your children. They finally told me that if I kept this attitude up, it would be better if the whole thing just ended. I responded that I didn't care, and the next morning I went back to my room and they were gone, off to Hawaii. The ceremony was small, but they posted tons of photos on Instagram and Facebook, describing how perfect and magical the whole week had been. People soon noticed that I wasn't in any of the photos and asked my parents why. They replied that, unfortunately, I had contracted the coronavirus before the trip and had to stay behind. I was furious about this, and I don't know why, but it felt like the last straw for me. But I decided to get tested for the coronavirus anyway and posted a photo of myself holding my negative test result with the caption, "Not even sick, just forgotten." I tagged everyone in the photo who questioned my absence from the trip and the wedding, as well as everyone who had been invited to the wedding. I also wrote a comment saying that my parents didn't even think to invite me until the day before I was due to leave, and that they had the nerve not to invite me. Most people were on my side, while others didn't believe me and thought there must be another reason for what I said. One thing was for sure, I had completely ruined my parents' wedding day, and my confession had made their day a complete downer. At first, I was quite pleased with myself, because I had stood up for myself after my family had spoken ill of me, and then when they returned, they lashed out at me for my childish and spoiled behavior. My pride quickly faded, and I began to feel really bad. I hated my family and being in this house, but I was still a minor and couldn't leave. Although I feel like I could have handled the situation better, I'm feeling really depressed right now, and I've been second-guessing everything I've done, from not speaking up before to the way I exposed them. I also feel guilty about the lack of connection I have with my family, and maybe I could have done more. As for my parents ruining the wedding by forgetting me, I wanted to live with my grandmother, but I'm going to college soon. I managed to arrange to start classes later in the school year, and the school is in the same city where we live, but my grandmother lives in another state, so I have to drop out of school and leave. I have no other family here, just friends. I didn't want to be the one who missed the wedding. My grandmother lives in another state and has mobility issues, so traveling is very difficult for her. So we only went to my mom's hometown. I know she saw my post on Facebook and called to ask how I was doing, but I put on a brave face, but I haven't contacted her since. We texted. I don't know if she knows the whole story or if my parents have told her a different version, but she's always been very nice to me and always criticizes my parents for being biased. I've recently been feeling exhausted, and the last thing I want to do is upset her, so I've hardly called her since the wedding, except that they have a very close relationship and I seem to be an outsider. I've never liked the same hobbies and activities as them. I'm an introvert and like to stay at home watching movies or reading. Meanwhile, my parents both like to be the center of attention at parties and often host events at home to entertain their friends. My siblings also enjoy these events. As a child, I was quite shy and always hid in my bedroom or basement to avoid contact with people. But as I grew older, I began to participate in these parties more and more. But my parents don't seem to mind, and that's the only explanation I can find. But I still feel that it's not enough. Commenter. If S real cop being a fair child, she is quite a few years younger than her siblings, and it would explain a lot. I have no idea about that. It's something that has never crossed my mind. I feel like my parents have always been a very close couple and spend a lot of time together and seem very happy, so I don't think my mother would cheat. Update 1. After seeing all the support, I felt somewhat reaffirmed in my actions and feelings towards my family. I'm still struggling with guilt and depression, but whenever I lose control of my emotions, I think about how much support this community of strangers has given me, and I will calm myself down with your words. Thank you for your comments and advice, and I finally decided to call my grandmother and tell her everything, just to clear the air. As I mentioned in the comments, but I feel I should mention it here as well, my grandmother 77F did not attend the wedding. She lives a few states away and has mobility issues, so she no longer travels. We visited her around Easter, and she said at the time that I could recite a poem at the wedding, but that was the last time I saw her in person before all this happened. She had always loved me very much and had complained in the past that my parents favored me, but it was difficult for her to play a more active role in my upbringing because she lived so far away, and I was always afraid of upsetting her because of her age and health. She had a minor stroke a few years ago and is now back to normal, but I'm still worried. Anyway, I called her and explained to her what had happened at the wedding and that my parents hadn't even bought me a plane ticket to go with them. When I told her that they could not have forgotten about it and that they had done it on purpose, she came to the same conclusion as most of the commenters. We cried on the phone about how I felt, that this had been going on for a long time, how I felt about the aftermath of this, and most of all that I needed to get out. She was very sweet to me, reassured me that I had nothing to worry about because of her, and told me to relax, but to plan for the future, which she helped me do after that conversation that lasted about 2 hours. I felt better and decided to listen to her and start planning for the next school year. I have a friend who is planning to rent a studio next to our future campus. She has a great relationship with her parents, but she has 5 younger siblings and wants to be more independent, so she decided to move out. I asked her if I could move in with her for the time being and pay rent once I get a job. She immediately agreed and told me not to worry about rent or anything else until I get better. We cried and hugged when I told her everything about my parents' wedding. This all happened a few days ago, and I was going to update, but my grandmother called my parents and siblings and lectured them about the way they treated me. My brother sent me a half-hearted apology in a text afterwards, saying he didn't know I wasn't, and that he just didn't think I'd like the trip, and then I posted that photo just to create drama. On the other hand, my sister blamed me, telling me that I had been trying to air my problems and blame my family for them when they were innocent. Things have been strange since my parents returned from their trip. At first they blamed me and were angry with me, and then after my grandmother called them, we just ignored each other. They came into my room and told me that if I wanted to calm things down, I should just shut up, and if I kept quiet, this whole thing would probably go away. I just told them to leave my room, and then I called my grandmother again to tell her what happened. She told me that she and my uncle had bought regular plane tickets to come see me. I was actually scared because my grandmother's health isn't very good, and such an effort would be too exhausting for her, and I knew how complicated it was for her to fly, so I tried to dissuade her from coming, telling her that everything would be fine. But she wouldn't listen. She told me that she had long wanted to talk to my parents, and she wanted to see me. I feel pressure for her, and I feel like I'm forcing her to make the long trip because of me. Maybe I should just deal with this on my own. I really want to see her, and I just want to hug her right now, but I'm worried about her. At least my uncle and my mom's brother are with her, but I hope she doesn't get exhausted or anything, because that would just break me. They're arriving tomorrow, but they haven't told my parents yet. My grandmother asked me to keep it a secret until she arrives. I hope she can make my parents see the error of their ways, or at least help me tell them that I'm going to move out soon and that I intend to cut them off. I don't know. I worry about upsetting her after all she's done for me, but I'm also so grateful and love everything she's done for me. Update: this week was very hectic, so my grandmother called to tell me she was coming to see me and help me. I was very nervous about this, as my grandmother travels very hard, so the trip meant a lot of stress for her. I felt responsible towards her because I was the one who called her. She arrived early on Monday morning with my uncle, and I went to the airport to pick her up. It was a very tense and emotional moment. When I saw her, I immediately ran towards her, threw my arms around her, and burst into tears. I didn't even know if I could say anything to her at that moment because I was crying so much and had so many things I wanted to say. Thank you for coming, for being so good to me, and for supporting me. I'm sorry I made you go on this trip. I feel so bad at home. I don't know if my parents love me, but I know you do. Am I a good child? When I saw her, I was overwhelmed by all this and by the guilt and anxiety, but she held me tightly in her arms and told me everything would be fine. My uncle hugged us too. I don't know how long we stayed like that, but it must have been a while until my uncle told me we should go. We took a taxi to their hotel. Grandma was crying, and I could feel her breathing heavily, which scared me, but she kept hugging me and smiling. She booked a double room so I could be with her for a few days. Once they had settled in and I had calmed down, we sat down and I told them about the neglect and emotional abuse I had suffered over the years, the pain I had felt after the trip, and how for years my parents had tried to make me feel guilty about what had happened. I was afraid for my future, but now my priority was to get out of that house, even if it meant sacrificing my studies. I had already arranged to move in with a friend, and I was looking for a job. I told them about the position and how some people thought I might be a problem child. I'm starting to wonder about that too. It's too much for me. I can see that they're really affected by what I say, but they keep reassuring me and telling me to talk to them. After I've told them all my worries, My grandmother reassures me that I'm loved and that she'll always be there for me. First of all, she assures me that I'm not a bastard. When my mother got pregnant with me, my parents were both over the moon. She knows that the thing my mother can't stand is being cheated on, and she's convinced that my father feels the same way. Apparently, the favoritism started when I was 3 or 4 years old, when my parents often complained about having a young child at home. They were bothered because they could take my older siblings to play, but not me. And I was very shy and cried a lot, which they had no patience for. This made me very different from my siblings. She told me that she knew my parents had saved enough for me to go to college, that they were very wealthy, and that's why I hadn't worried until now that they might take some of the money away from my education. But if they didn't pay my tuition, she would take care of it. She wouldn't let me drop out of school because of money. She also told me that she would help me pay the rent and subsidize me to move out. She is very generous, and I am grateful for that, but I also told her that this experience has opened my eyes because I never realized how financially privileged I had been my whole life, and that despite their flaws, my parents had always taken care of me. I have been rich my whole life. I went to private school, and I had a substantial monthly allowance. I have had a credit card for many years, and they have never objected to any of my spending. Reading this story, I realize how lucky I have been so far, and that depending on them my whole life has made it very easy for me to lose everything. I want to be independent now, not only from my parents, but from everyone. I feel like I need to learn to be independent. Writing this down and just reading all the stories of people in really bad situations makes me feel like I have been spoiled my whole life. Frankly, she insisted that I accept her help until I no longer need it. I accepted, but I would still look for a job and try to support myself. We relaxed in the hotel for a while because we were both exhausted in the morning, but in the afternoon we took a taxi to my house. When I entered the door, my parents were very surprised to see me with my grandmother and uncle, but before they could say anything, my grandmother told me to go pack my essentials while they talked to them. I rushed upstairs and heard my grandmother and uncle scolding my parents for everything they had done to me in the beginning. I also heard my parents trying to defend themselves, but eventually they quieted down. When I came downstairs with 2 suitcases and my backpack filled with all the important things for my room, they were both in the living room. My father was red in the face, my mother was crying like a child, and when she saw me she held her arms out to me and said she was sorry. But I just said, in my coldest tone, save it. The coldest tone I could muster. My father said I didn't have to be provoked, and my uncle and grandmother told him to shut up. I left the house and waited for a taxi outside the hotel. My grandmother reassured me that I didn't have to go back to them, that they had told her that my university fees had never been a problem for them, that they had planned to throw me a lavish birthday party to make up for the wedding fiasco and to apologize for everything by giving me a car. But my grandmother didn't believe any of it because she knew they were just trying to save face and that a party in a car was the last thing they would come up with to make up for all the pain they had caused me. Apparently, the moment my mother broke down was when she told her that I had even questioned my paternity. She cried then, but my grandmother told her what else could they expect? They had repeatedly excluded me from all family activities since I was a child. She told me that she would make sure they paid my school unless I would prefer to cut off all ties with them and let her pay the tuition until I could pay for myself. I let her do it, and I felt bad because I didn't think it was her responsibility, but I really didn't want anything more from my parents. Although my grandmother was doing well for herself, she wasn't as wealthy as my parents, but she assured me that everything would be fine and that I would get everything from my mother's inheritance. So the next day we went with my friend, her parents, and grandmother to the new studio we had planned to move to. As soon as we arrived, my grandmother said absolutely not. I knew from the pictures that the studio was very, very small and dirty, but when we saw the bathroom and kitchenette with water damage and mold, as well as rust and old appliances, I knew all of this beforehand, but I thought it would be tolerable for a while. But the one thing the adults pointed out that made my friend and I change our minds was that the studio apartment was on the street level in a bad neighborhood, and the building didn't look safe either, with bullet holes in the walls. I didn't even know what they were until my friend's dad pointed them out. My grandmother and my friend's parents said they would find an apartment for us in a better place, and they would help pay the costs. My friend and I both want to be independent, but we realize that in such a high-demand area, we are likely to only be able to find minimum-wage jobs, and we won't be able to find anything better on our own. So our plan is that we will look for a 2-bedroom apartment, and my friend and I will pay for the studio we were planning on using, and her parents and my grandmother will pay the difference. I know I'm still mad that I was expecting help from my grandmother, but after seeing the studio for myself, I really don't feel safe there. My friend's parents more or less knew what I had been through and told me I could move in with them until we found a suitable apartment. I was very grateful because my grandmother was going back in a few days and had been staying with her in a hotel. It was clear that my friend, her parents, and my grandmother had discussed this before coming to see me to make sure I had a safe place to stay until I moved into an apartment, which I still hadn't found. When I thanked them, I almost cried because I saw that people were offering to help me, and since then, some things have been moved from my parents' house to my friends, and my mother apologizes every time she sees me, crying, and even my father has said he's sorry. But I've kept my distance from them. My sister called and said that our mother is a mess and I'm an asshole, but before she could finish, I hung up and blocked her. I was about to block my brother too, when I saw that he had sent me a long message apologizing over and over again for everything I had done and for not realizing how badly my parents had treated me. He said that since Grandma had called him and realized that she had wronged me by thinking that I didn't want to go on the trip because I didn't want to, and because I had allowed my parents to exclude me for so many years. He had sent me a short message thanking him for his words, but telling him that I needed space and that I wasn't ready to accept his apology. I think he might be sincere because he has never treated me with indifference like my sister, but I also feel that I need to stay away from him for a while and keep my distance from my family, which seems to be the right thing to do now. Everything is very new, and maybe in the future he will let me know that he hates it as much as everyone else, and I will reject him, but as long as he respects my boundaries, I think it would be better not to completely cut off contact. I have also made an appointment with a psychologist who specializes in treating neglected teenagers. I have to go for the first preliminary consultation next week, and Grandma is still paying for it. This makes me more eager to find a job as soon as possible to reduce her burden, even though she has repeatedly said that she is happy to do all this for me. So that's it. I don't know if I'll be updating anymore, maybe when I start classes or move into an apartment, but for now I just want to enjoy the time I have with my grandma and uncle, learn to grow up, and get rid of the guilt and depression that have been plaguing me for so long. I want to thank all the members of this community again for your kindness and help, for sending me your personal stories of being thrown out of your homes, for having to learn how to live independently at too young an age, for making me feel less alone, and for making me realize that if I try hard, everything will be okay. My grandmother, my uncle, and my friends have given me such strong support that I feel spoiled. But you were right, opening up was the best decision I could have made. Opening up to the people who love me and to you, my online friends, has definitely saved me. Really, I can't express my gratitude in words. Every time I go there, my mother cries and keeps saying sorry over and over again. But I don't talk to her, so she doesn't mention anything specific. Without giving her a chance, my father mostly stays silent and just stares at me, but when he apologizes, he's more sorry than apologizing for any of his wrongdoings. I don't know if they were shocked by what was happening, if I felt overwhelmed and didn't have time to process it, or if they thought they hadn't done anything wrong and were just acting in Grandma's interests. I don't know myself, so I can't give a definite answer. My grandmother had already told me that if I wasn't going to university because my parents didn't want to pay the fees, she wouldn't allow me to apply for a student loan either, which was unacceptable. I asked her if she would co-sign, and she ran away and told me no, that she would rather pay for it herself than see me stressed about it. I won't give up my education for my parents, but since I have the option to let my grandmother pay for it, I will do it because I would rather the money not come from my parents, knowing that they will always hold it over me like I owe them. I'm lucky that my grandmother will help me with this. I feel undeserving of her help. I feel guilty and angry about my origins and blind to the privileges I have enjoyed in my life. This self-perception has only become apparent to me in recent weeks, because when I first argued with my parents, I hardly considered the issue of money or how I would support myself. It was always taken for granted, which is not bad considering I'm not yet 18. But after posting here and seeing the comments from people who have to struggle with financial problems, who suffer from neglect, broken relationships with their families, or prematurely entering society, it made me realize how disconnected I am from reality. I feel angry at myself for being so careless with money and privileges that most people don't have. I want to do two things. One is to thank the people who have helped me and the help they have given me, and the other is that in the future, I want to become independent and realize that other people have not grown up in expensive neighborhoods with 5 beds in a room, have not gone to private schools, and have not received other gifts. Update 3: I have been very busy, and I have tried to get away from everything that has happened to me, but if anyone wants to hear, I am back to update on how things are going and to review where I left off. I moved in with a friend's grandmother to visit me. I moved in with a friend's family, where we were finally able to rebel against my neglectful parents. My grandmother and uncle left a few days after I posted my last update, and it was the first time in my life that I felt protected and loved by my family. It was a very touching moment. I'm sure there have been less depressing and lonely moments in my life, but that week with my grandmother made me truly feel that I had someone's unconditional support. I will always be grateful for her support when I returned home. I went to my parents' house and we looked for an apartment. She had already become a private preschool teacher and found me a job there. We are still colleagues. I was very happy to be hired, as the job was great and the salary was pretty good for my first job. We also found an apartment close to the school with 2 bedrooms and a nice living room and kitchen. It's not big, but it's clean and there are lots of university students living nearby, so it's a great environment with lots of cool places to hang out and meet new people. We're moving house, and I'm writing this update from my new bedroom. I celebrated my 18th birthday a few weeks ago, and it was awesome. I went to a restaurant with some friends and had a great time. The only dramatic thing my parents have done since the apocalypse was show up at my friend's house on my birthday to see me. I wasn't there, but my friend, he told me they were really sorry and asked him to contact them for me. They left a letter for him in which they basically admitted to being terrible parents, but wanted to make amends and begged me to talk to them. Maybe what I did next was cold-hearted, but I decided not to respond to them and asked my friend's dad to tell them that if they showed up again, they should just leave. He respected my wishes, and part of me wanted to go to them and try to repair our relationship, but I also felt that I had put in so much effort just to let them know that I existed and that they had hurt me, and if I went back, I would be betraying myself and the efforts I had made after my birthday to grow up and become independent. I had a few weeks before we moved into the new apartment, so I went to see my grandmother at her house, showed her the photos I had taken of the new apartment, told her about my new job, and the course I would be taking after the year. She was very happy for me. We also had a family party to celebrate my birthday, with my uncle and cousins coming to my grandmother's house. We had a small party, and my brother came too. I slowly started to talk to my brother about my immediate family. He was the only one who had never been mean to me, and even though he had neglected me and enjoyed my parents' favor, he had never been mean to me. I felt that he too had been a victim of the toxic environment in our family. I didn't completely trust him, but he apologized very sincerely, and he lived close to me, so he wanted me to feel that I could rely on him if I needed help. Knowing that there is at least one family member in the city who worries about me and is there to help me if I need it, I do feel safer. I asked him once about my parents, and he told me that he himself has had very little contact with them since I left, and that he blames them for the whole situation. While my sister insists that I am selfish and have caused my parents pain because the problem is with me. I don't know what's going on, and it seems that my parents have also been alienated by many friends because of the news of my disappearance. But according to my brother, they have been asking about me and are now telling anyone who will listen that they don't blame me but want to correct their mistakes. I don't know if they agree with my actions, and I feel like they know that the best way for them to salvage their reputation now is to try to kick the reconciliation ball my way so they can appear to have done their best. I'm more concerned about my future than ever, and I really don't want to think about them. I'm going to therapy, trying to grow up and accept the love I'm getting from my new support system. My friends, her family, my grandmother, my uncles, cousins, and maybe my brother. I hope this is my last update because I want to close this chapter of my life, and if I come back here, it might mean something happened, but I want to share the good news with you because you truly saved my life in my time of despair. Update 4. First of all, my life is really good. I have officially moved into an apartment with my best friend, and we have turned it into our own little paradise. We decorated the room with little fairy lights, filled it with plants, most of which I am desperately trying to keep alive, and bought a lot of cozy blankets. I have thrown myself into my tutoring job, and the lessons are both challenging and exciting. To be honest, I felt refreshed by the routine and the lack of my parents' omnipresent neglect, but things couldn't stay calm forever. Somehow my parents had obtained my new address, and I don't know whether they got it from my brother or just looked it up, but one evening they suddenly appeared in my apartment. It was about 9 p.m. My roommate and I heard a knock on the door, but we didn't expect anyone to be there, so I looked through the peephole and I saw that it was my parents standing in the dimly lit hallway. They looked haggard and desperate, and I felt a sudden spasm in my stomach. My roommate was about to assume the stance of a guard dog, but I told her I'd handle it. As soon as I opened the door, they immediately started apologizing, in a way that made it seem like they were having an emotional breakdown. My mom was crying, and my dad looked like he hadn't slept in days. They kept saying how sorry they were. They begged me to let them in so they could talk. I let them in, mainly because I was so shocked, but I made it clear that this was not an invitation to reconcile. They sat down on my sofa and began to pour out their guilt. It became clear that their circle of friends had distanced themselves from them more than I had realized. Once word got out about what they had done to me, they lost a lot of their social connections, and even family members, including my maternal grandmother and uncle, distanced themselves from them. My younger sister still took their side, but my older brother almost completely cut off contact with them. They told me that they had started individual and couples therapy, which had made them realize how terribly they had treated me. My father admitted that he had always seen my brother as his little buddy, and my mother had done the same with my sister, but they had not made room for me. My mother admitted, with a sob, that she had taken me for granted as an independent child who never asked for attention. It was unbelievable to hear them say that a year ago. I would give anything for them to acknowledge the pain they have caused me, but now it feels like it's too late. I told them that while I appreciated their words, I wasn't ready to forgive them yet, and I wasn't sure if I ever could. My dad said he understood, and my mom just cried. They asked if I would like to get together for dinner some other time just to talk, no pressure. I told them I would think about it and let them know when they left. My roommate and I sat for a long time, digesting everything. On the one hand, I wanted to believe them and give them a chance, but on the other hand, I felt that they were only doing this because they were facing real consequences for their actions. I talked about it with my therapist, and she helped me realize that I don't owe them anything and that I can move on with my life if leaving them is the best option for me. As for my brother, our relationship has actually gotten better. He recently invited me over to his house for dinner, just the two of us. We had a very in-depth conversation. He admitted that he had been selfish growing up and had never realized how lonely I had been. He told me that he wanted to make it up to me. Although I am still on my guard, I am willing to accept him into my life and take it easy. My grandmother is still my pillar of support. Every month she sends me small packages with homemade cookies, cozy socks, and handwritten letters, which make me tear up every time I see them. She also told me that if I wanted to transfer to a school closer to her, she would help me with everything. It's tempting, but for now I want to stay put and build my life. My sister, on the other hand, hasn't changed. She sent me a long text accusing me of callously neglecting my parents and causing them to suffer. She said I'm acting like a spoiled brat and family is family. I left her in read, so what am I supposed to do? I don't know. I face problems every day, and maybe one day, or maybe not right now, I just want to focus on myself, my studies, my work, and those who have always supported me. I want to thank everyone who has followed my journey and given me encouragement. Thank you. You have helped me find the strength to persevere, and I will be forever grateful. I don't know if this will be my last update, but I do know that no matter what happens next, I can finally take control of my own destiny.